At 5:43 a.m., Christopher Coleman called 911. His voice was controlled. He told the dispatcher his wife and children weren't breathing. Inside the house, everything was quiet. But investigators would later focus on a different question. Why did Christopher Coleman report threats before his family was killed, and then become the only one left alive? On May 5, 2009, deputies from the Monroe County Sheriff's Office responded to a residence in Columbia, Illinois. A suburban neighborhood just outside St. Louis. The street was calm. No visible disturbance inside the home. Deputies found 3 victims: Sherry Coleman and her 2 sons, Garrett and Gavin. All 3 had been strangled. There were no signs of forced entry, no indication that anyone had broken into the house. Sherry Coleman was 31 years old. She was known as a committed mother. Most of her time revolved around her children, school schedules, family routines, daily structure. Garrett, 11, and Gavin, 9, were both active in school life. Neighbors described them as respectful and energetic, a typical suburban family. Christopher Coleman worked as a security guard for a nationally known televangelist. His role required trust, discipline, consistency. From the outside, the family appeared stable. No reported history of violence, no public signs of crisis. But early in the investigation, something didn't align. The house showed no evidence of forced entry. Doors were intact. Windows were closed. Nothing suggested an intruder. At the same time, investigators learned that the family had reported receiving threats, emails, messages warning of violence, messages that suggested someone was targeting them. This created 2 possible directions: an external attacker or something else entirely. Investigators collected multiple threatening emails sent to the family. The messages referenced violence. They suggested that the family was being watched. They implied an approaching attack. At first, this supported the theory of an external suspect. Digital forensic analysis later traced the origin of these emails. They were sent from devices and locations connected directly to Christopher Coleman. Coleman stated he had left the house early that morning to go to the gym. This aligned with his routine. Nothing unusual on the surface. Surveillance footage and access records did not fully confirm his movements. There were inconsistencies, time gaps, moments that could not be clearly verified. During the investigation, detectives uncovered that Coleman was involved in an extramarital relationship. At first, this appeared unrelated to the murders, a personal issue, not a criminal one. Further examination showed that Coleman had discussed leaving his wife, starting a new life, a different future. Coleman's employment depended on his public image and stability. Divorce could have affected his position, his income, his standing. Investigators concluded that a separation would have created significant personal and financial consequences for him. The absence of forced entry shifted attention toward someone inside the home. Digital tracing connected the threatening emails back to Coleman. His statements did not fully match the timeline supported by evidence. The combination of an extramarital relationship and financial risk created a potential motive. The staged threats suggested premeditation, an attempt to control how the crime would be interpreted. The investigation moved in cycles. Each new piece of evidence raised a question. then answered part of it, then created another. External threat, then internal contradiction, then behavioral inconsistency, then digital confirmation. The pattern became clearer over time. The turning point came with the full digital analysis. Not just that the emails were fabricated, but how they were constructed. Timing, language, origin points all pointed in the same direction. This was not random, this was preparation. At that point, investigators stopped asking whether the threats were real. They started asking why they were created. According to investigators, this is what likely happened. Christopher Coleman created a series of threatening emails in advance. These messages established the idea of an external enemy, a narrative that could later explain a violent outcome. On the night of May 4th into the early morning of May 5th, inside the family home, Sherry Coleman and her 2 sons were killed by strangulation. There was no sign of forced entry, no struggle, indicating an outsider. The environment suggested familiarity. After the killings, Coleman left the house. He maintained part of his routine. Later, he contacted emergency services, reporting the discovery. Investigators determined that the threats were not warnings. They were set up, a controlled attempt to shape the narrative before the crime occurred. The reason Christopher Coleman reported threats was to create a future explanation, one that pointed away from him. According to Monroe County Court records, Christopher Coleman was charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder. During the trial, prosecutors presented digital evidence, behavioral analysis, and timeline inconsistencies. The jury found him guilty. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The Monroe County Sheriff's Office confirmed that no credible evidence of an external attacker was ever identified. The case remains closed. In the end, the investigation did not rely on a single piece of evidence. It relied on a pattern, a constructed narrative, and the breakdown of that narrative under scrutiny: 3 victims, 1 controlled story, and the question that led investigators to the answer: